finish the course. When you think about making a course, it's very difficult. It's really lonely too. So we would help people like say, hey, commit to a date. If you publish by that date, we'll like give you prizes and kind of gamify it a little bit. So I moved into that role. Then after that, I moved into the student side of marketing and did international paid ads. So this is kind of like doing Facebook advertisements, Google advertisements. And then finally from there, I moved into product management. And that was about 3 years ago or so. And I'm sharing kind of like this journey with you guys. So some takeaways from this is one is if you want to marry someone, major in the same thing as that person. Another takeaway is there's not necessarily a template for a product manager. Like you can come from different backgrounds. I think in the past, like it used to be very like people with a technical background could become product managers. But I think it's more open and there's very different ways to get into product management. I have a lot of product management friends who didn't study computer science or didn't do anything like that related and were like political science majors, etc. So yeah, if you're interested in becoming a product manager, know that like I would focus more on getting relevant experience and like being passionate and like learning what it means to be a product manager and doing those things, than worrying too much about like, oh, what should I get an MBA or even things like that. You don't necessarily have to get like an MBA to become a product manager. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what is it like to be a product manager, and so you can get a little bit more concrete picture of what they do. I thought I would start off by talking about maybe some definition. I just threw this together about what does a product manager do. And so a product manager is a facilitative leader that strives to strategically improve products to bring maximum value to the user and the business. And so some things I want to highlight there. One is the product manager is a facilitative leader. So we're not like a CEO, right? We're not like making just decisions and we're not like necessarily building a product. We're trying to get teams together to like think and collaborate and as a team build something. So there's a lot of like coordination, stakeholder management, that kind of stuff that's good to have as a product manager. Another thing is like they try to think strategically, and kind of when you think about that, you kind of think about what is your company and what is your product and like how is it unique in the market space comparing to other competitors. What's the vision and like what's the steps we think we need to get there, the sequence of events, and what kind of investment should we make. Maximum value. I think what I'm trying to get at here is that a lot of product management is about like prioritization and focusing on the right things, what things to work on and what things to try to solve. And the last thing is to the user and the business. Obviously, you're trying to help the business, but oftentimes when you just think about like, oh, how do we increase revenue? That's not really a helpful way to think about things, and you want to make sure that you're thinking about your users and your customers and who you're serving, and make sure you solve their problems in a way that also helps the business, right? So yeah, what does a PM actually do? We talked about what is a PM. Yeah, so this is kind of like to give you a flavor of like what my life looks like in the span of like a year or so. These are kind of the things like they're like product managers like are responsible for. Like maybe once a year or so, every so often, there's some very high level kind of thinking where you work with a team to define or refine your mission, your vision, your strategy for the product team. At a quarterly level, most companies and our company, like we kind of set objectives, like projects or initiatives that we want to pursue, and then set goals for those. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with OKRs. I have a link here, but I realize nobody can click it. But if you just Google, you guys can Google OKRs. So OKRs, it stands for Objectives and Key Results, and it's kind of a way to set goals for teams and help companies and teams focus and try to push ourselves to be better. And it's a framework that's used by many companies. I think Google actually popularized it, and so they have like a little tutorial. So if you want to learn more about that, you can just search for it. And then every 2 weeks, we kind of work in sprints to like decide what to work on and work towards those goals and build an actual product. So that's kind of like a calendar like cycle, but I'm gonna talk mainly about the product development cycle. And so this is kind of how we come up with things to build and new features to create. And so first, we want to identify and define big problems. So this is a very big portion of it, where you want to figure out like, hey, where should we focus? Where are some problems what are some interesting problems we want to tackle? And some of the methods you do to do that is you do data analysis, try to figure out like, oh, can we use data to figure out where we should be focusing, where we should be prioritizing, where their problems are. You use user research to kind of like talk with customers to figure out like, oh, what are their pain points, what are the issues that they have, what are they trying to do? And then you also use like your gut and just like the vision you have, and that's kind of like intuition a little bit about like what you think should be happening. Then after you define this problem, you kind of go into a stage of brainstorming solutions, and the key here is to kind of like go broad, right? Like, and there's different methods to brainstorm. A lot of this comes from like the design world, product design world, and so you guys can also Google some of these exercises like question storming and crazy eights. These are like exercises to help the team like think of different solutions, and in this stage, generally, you don't want to evaluate the solutions. You just want to like go for quantity more than quality, and just think of many different ways you can try to solve this problem that you've defined. The question storming is a nice way, so let me just explain that. Question storming is basically, you're in a room with some people, a team, and the only thing you can do is ask questions. So you can't like say an answer to anybody's question. You can only ask questions, and it helps you think of like, oh, like interesting questions to think about, interesting nuances to the problem. And then crazy eights is kind of a very like designy kind of way to do it. You get a piece of paper, you fold it up into 8 little squares, and you get 1 minute per square to think of some solution, and then when a minute passes, you have to move on to the next square and draw another solution or like write another solution. And the goal here again is like, it's kind of fast, and like usually the first 3 are kind of easy, but by the 8th one, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, like what's another solution? But it helps you, it pushes you to like think of things that you might not have naturally thought about. So that's kind of the second step of the product development cycle. Then from there, now you get into evaluating those different ideas and solutions you have, and you prioritize them. You can use like there's different frameworks to kind of help you prioritize what you should work on. A very simple one is an impact versus effort framework. I'll go into that later. Then from there, you want to like think about your solution and like be explicit about what are the risks that you have. So anytime you have an idea, right, it's always just an idea. It's a hypothesis. It's a bet. And like Tom said, oftentimes your bet or your hypothesis is wrong. You think, oh, if I build this, it will help my customer, but it might not actually help them. And so you want to like, because we want to move fast, you want to try to like make sure like we're thinking about what are the areas, what are some of the assumptions I'm making, and what are those that could be wrong, and try to find that and see if like, okay, there's a big assumption I'm making here. Could we try to quickly figure out a way to de-risk that a little bit? Then you like build and test by building an MVP, which stands for minimum viable product. You launch it usually as an experiment, and then from there you iterate. You look at the experiment results, and then analyze that. Maybe do some user research, do some QA, and then go again and go back to the drawing board and think about how to improve your feature. And then throughout all this, you're kind of like trying to build alignment and buy-in throughout. So like there's oftentimes other teams that you want to work with, and you need to like give them the context and like convince them of this, or like create energy that everybody's excited to work on this thing. So I wanted to like, that's kind of pretty theoretical, but I wanted to like walk you through an example of a real feature that we launched at Udemy. It's not the most like sexy feature. It's not super cool, but I think it helps like demonstrate this process. So step 1 is identifying big problem areas. So how do you find out like where are big problem areas to focus on? So one question we had in our search team is like, how can we improve our search experience for our users? And so one question to think about to help you figure that out is you think that what might be some signals of a good or bad search experience, right? Like what signal might tell you like, oh, you're doing well here, you're not doing well here. And so, for example, an obvious one is conversion rate, right? When someone on Udemy searches for a course, you see what courses come up, and you see like, oh, are people actually converting and buying a course after they search for that query, or are they not? Like after they search that query, maybe they leave the website, or they search a different query, right? And so conversion rate might be a thing to do. So our team once a while back, we classified our queries. We looked at like all of our queries on Udemy that people are searching, and we kind of divided them into 3 buckets of like high, medium, low converting queries. Then you kind of like see what we did was we looked at, okay, now we have a signal, a group of queries that are low converting. So the data tells you, here's a place you want to look into. Then you want to follow those sites to figure out like why is it low converting, right? The data's not going to tell you why it's bad per se. So you want to look into that. So we looked into that, and with the low converting queries, it was pretty obvious what the problems were, and so we started working on projects to help with that. But that's not the only thing you can think. That doesn't mean the high converting queries are like great either. And so this is kind of what I wanted to talk about is how we were trying to improve some of our higher converting queries. So because high conversion is relative, right? I'm saying it converts better than that low converting query, but the high converting query is still probably like maybe like a 10% conversion rate. And so 90% of people are not buying something, are not finding what they want maybe. And so when you think about how can you improve that, what we did was we did some user research. Another reason why we focused on high converting queries is like when you in the search domain, obviously there's a long tail. There's a lot of queries that people write maybe once that's kind of long and not very popular. But our most popular queries, like our top 800 queries, which is not that many, make up about 50% of the revenue on Udemy. And so if we can optimize this even more, like you could see the potential impact we can have. And so what we did is, this is not actually the survey we ran, but this is like a tool that we use where we show a pop-up on the website where we ask people like, hey, where we did some user research we targeted our top 500 queries, and when they would search that, the user would get a little pop-up, and then they would answer a survey question for us to figure out how we can improve it. And so when we looked at the results, one thing that many users were saying that, hey, like this is kind of the statements that people were saying, like, oh, there's too many to choose from, I don't know where to start, not sure which course is the right one, which course is best for me. And so you can see that when you search for Python on Udemy, you have a lot of courses that seem very similar, right? And people often have like anxiety about like, oh, which one is the best one for me? Like I'm overwhelmed, there's so many options, how do I choose? So that's kind of what users were saying. And again, I think I want to go into the first step of the process is defining the problem. So I don't know, have you guys seen this quote before? People have seen this quote? Yeah, so many people have seen this quote. I think it's a really interesting, helpful quote. So this is Henry Ford, the maker of the first mass manufactured automobile. And he said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And so the kind of lesson here is like, don't just take what the user says they want. Oftentimes people will ask users like, hey, like, what do you want us to build? Like, if you had a magic wand, like, what would you want us to build? And then they say some ideas, or some very passionate users will even like write into Udemy and write into our support team and say, hey, can you guys build this feature? And I think that information is useful, but it's important not to just take it as that, right? Because they might be just asking for a faster course, when that's not really their problem, that's not really their goal that they're trying to solve, right? Someone who wants a faster course, their main goal is to get from A to B in a quick way. But faster courses is one solution to that. There's other solutions to that, and we want to make sure we frame the problem in a way where we can come up with different solutions. So for example, this is like one template you can use to like define your problem. It's like when I want to, so that, and the when I talks about the situation, I want to is the user's goal and their motivation, and the so that is the desired outcome. So you can imagine a scenario back in the day where someone says, when I want advice from a friend, I want to get to his house quickly so that I can have more time to talk with my friend. And when you think about that, you can say, oh, I want to get to his house quickly. The automobile is a way to solve that problem. When you think about their end desires, they want to have more time to talk with my friend. You could actually solve this problem without a faster horse or an automobile. You can solve it with a telephone, right? And so you can see how even these products that seem like they're different products can actually be competing products for the same user need. Another thing to kind of like say is like the nuances of defining the problem. You can see how it affects the types of solutions that you come up with. Right, so one way to frame this problem on the left side is that the elevator is too slow. And when you frame it that way, when you talk about, hey, how can we improve this elevator? and you frame it the elevator is too slow, your solution is kind of like, okay, let's think of ways to make the elevator faster. But if you reframe that problem to be more about like, hey, the wait is annoying on this elevator, I don't like waiting in the elevator, you kind of come up with a different set of solutions that are about how do you make the wait feel shorter. So maybe like think about like that problem that you've heard like students say, like I'm overwhelmed by all these choices, what do you do? And so like I like it's kind of interesting to try to like frame it different ways here. And so this is the way we try to frame that problem. It says when I'm trying to pick a course to learn something, and I've searched on Udemy, and I see that I see what seems to be a sea of similar courses that could all be helpful for me. One thing is I want to feel confident that I'm not missing out on a better course, right? Like people have a fear of like, oh, like I don't know what to choose because maybe I should get this one, but I'm scared that I'm actually gonna miss out and pick the wrong course, right? So that's one fear that they have, and so they want some confidence with that. Another thing is like I want to make the task of evaluating and choosing a course feel manageable. Right now it's really hard to like, it takes so much time for me to compare different courses. I need to click into them and like research and read the reviews and read the description. And it's so much time that I know that I'll have to spend researching that I don't even want to do it, right? Another problem might be, I want to feel confident that this course fits my situation, right? Like, oh, there's one Python course that looks pretty good, there's another Python course that looks pretty good, but I'm kind of a beginner, but not a beginner. I already know a little bit of like Java or something, right? And so like, there's different situations and you want to find the perfect course for your situation. And so that's another like problem that like users might have. And so again, like to summarize it, FOMO, make it manageable and like help people have confidence in the fit of the course. Those are kind of like the problems that we were trying to solve. And so here are some of the solutions that we like kind of came up with. So one was maybe we can build a wizard. Not like a Harry Potter wizard, but like this like quiz on the side, right? Where you guide a user step by step in answering their questions to understand their preferences, and then you recommend the course to them. And we think if we do that, it'll make the process more manageable because you're only getting one question at a time, and like they'll also feel confident because you understood their need. And so we built this thing, this is a mock-up, this is just a design, where you have questions about, hey, like you're trying to choose a SQL course, and we ask you a first question. There's more questions that we would ask afterwards that talk about like, okay, like, what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to do with it? Like, what's your level right now? What's the most advanced thing you know in SQL? And like maybe even the teaching style, what's more important for you? And so you kind of get these different questions, and at the end of it, it's like, okay, here, like based off what you said, here's a top recommendation for you. So that was one idea that we had, right? Another idea that we had to solve this problem is, okay, maybe we can just, if people are having a hard time choosing between these courses that look very similar, maybe we could show more details so that people can see the differences between courses. And so we had a quick view. When you hover over it, you'll see like, oh, the reviews frequently mention this thing about this course. Like, oh, people really like it because it has a comprehensive curriculum. It teaches everything. And the instructor is very engaging. And we surface it so that people can see how different courses are different and then make the decision for themselves. It's a little bit different, right? It's still serving the same problem, but solving it by putting it in the user's head and they can control it. The third one that we thought of was kind of a different way to solve this problem, right? One is kind of helping you like have knowledge and get to the best one. Another one is like, hey, like people have anxiety about choosing like the perfect course. Can we like make it easy for them to not just choose one course, make it easy for them to take multiple so that they don't have to put all their bet in just one single course. So we thought maybe if we provided some special discount of like, if you buy more courses, you get more % off or you save more money, something like that, that could make you like, oh, let me just, I'm like, previously a user was like looking at one course and another course and like, oh, which one should I take? Now we can, they're like, hey, just buy both of them. And like, you just don't worry about it. And that's another way to solve this problem, right? An alternative way, like similar to this idea, is like a trial thing. Like maybe we let people just take try three, and you could keep one of them. So you don't have to like worry about this, and you can like try it out. So those are like some of the approaches that we talked about. So again, like this is to the brainstorm approach. We had a lot more solutions than this, but this is kind of like some of the ones that we narrowed down on. And then step 3 is kind of prioritizing the solutions. And so there's a simple matrix where you look at it from dimension of impact, how impactful do we think that would be, and how much effort we think it would be. So when you do brainstorm, you're probably gonna have like 12, 20 unit ideas, and you'll find some that are maybe just even in the like low effort or high effort, low impact things. Those ones you just completely ignore, just throw those out. Other ones you might try to think about the trade-offs of which one you should pursue. But these ones we were kind of like, okay, the quick view, like we have the data, it's gonna be somewhat tedious to make it, but it's not super high effort. We think it'll be a big impact. But things like the wizard, where you have to come up with specific questions, that's gonna be a lot of effort to do. Like how are you gonna scale that? How are you gonna do that for many queries? Even the bulk discount and trial thing, that's a very thing that gets into like the payments, which is another team that we would have to work with, and it's kind of complex. So there was high effort there. So this is not a great scenario. And so one thing that is helpful to think about is when you have a lot of solutions that seem expensive, try to push yourself to try to get to the core hypothesis. Like what's the main assumption and hypothesis that you're going to test, and see if you can make it less expensive somehow. So for example, with the trial thing or the bulk discount thing, we're like, okay, that's gonna be really hard to do. But then we were thinking, try 3, keep 1. That's kind of like a trial where you can reduce the risk of picking the wrong course. And we actually have a refund policy on Udemy that already exists, where if you try a course, if you buy it if you don't like it after 30 days, you can get you can ask for your money back if you don't like the course. And so that's basically like a trial experience in a weird way, right? Like kind of a weird thing. And we said, okay, what if we just show this notice on the search page? Maybe that will help people be more comfortable to just oh yeah, let me just try a few courses and buy them. And so this was we severely reduced the cost of this idea, right, by doing this form of the feature. And so now when you look at it, that idea now becomes super low effort. It's super easy to do. It's just a text front end change, right? Not much need to do that. So that's one thing to do, is try to think about what is the core thing that you're trying to work on. The other thing to mention, step 4, is, okay, now we're kind of we have these different ideas and we want to define the risks and the assumptions. And generally, the more expensive something is, something that it's going to require a lot more effort, the more you want confidence that it's actually going to work. Like Tom mentioned, maybe 80% of the time what you do is not going to work. So if you spend months building this thing and then it just doesn't work, that's a lot of wasted effort. So you want to increase your confidence. And so think of ways that how can you reduce some of those risks. One framework to use is this person, Marty Kagan. He talks about 4 types of risks. One type of risk is a value risk, whether customers will use that or find value in the thing that you're building. The second one is a usability risk. When you build this thing, are they going to know how to use this, or is it going to be confusing to them? Is feasibility risk. Can we even do it? Do we have the data? Do we have the technology? Do we have the people to do that? The last one is a business viability risk, and this is kind of hey, does this conflict with our company, our brand, our other priorities, etc. And so kind of building out those risks and then thinking of ways that you can de-risk that. One way to de-risk this, for example, with the wizard, we weren't sure. Hey, even if we could do this, would it be helpful for a user? Would they find value in it? And so one thing that we did, they trust our recommendation, right? So one thing you can do is, instead of building it, having engineering effort building it, you can create a mock-up and use design to kind of create some fake experience where you can click on it and it'll move to the next image and show you that. So we basically created a mock-up and we talked to users and showed this to users to see how they would react to it. So that's one way to kind of de-risk it, using designs and mock-ups and wireframes. But that, again, like I mentioned in the previous slide, the more expensive something is, the more you kind of want some confidence to do this. But sometimes if it's not expensive, you can just skip this step, right? And you can just build the thing. And that might be the fastest way to actually test the idea. And so, for example, with the refund notice, we didn't really test it. We just built it because it would be super simple to build. We built it and then we launched the experiment and we tested it. One tip here is when you build a test, you typically, it's nice to kind of come up with at least 2 variants. So even with the refund notice, it seems like a pretty simple thing. But there's different execution risks there. There's still some risks, and so you want to see can I quickly come up with a different, slightly different thing to make sure that we didn't execute on the idea in the wrong way. And so for that, one thing that we did was we just tested one in one position and one in another position on the page, because the risk there is maybe the user won't see that thing, right? And so you want to put 2 different variants. And so we launched this test with 2 variants. It was successful, and you'll see it on the website now. And then the last thing we do is oftentimes, like Tom mentioned, experiments don't work very well, so you want to analyze and iterate, dig into the results, the A/B test, and figure out, okay, why didn't it do well? What part did people not do what we thought they would do? And then develop new hypotheses, change your product, change your feature, and then test it again. And so the important thing here is to not get too attached. Oftentimes, especially when you build something when you invested a lot of time, you really want it to work, but that's kind of also what's helpful by thinking about a lot of different ideas. It helps you not get too attached to one idea, and you can just test and go to the next thing. Cool, so that's actually all I have. But I just wanted to end with a caveat and thanks. So caveat means kind of warning. So the warning here, so this is my wife and my daughter. The warning here is that I'm like my daughter here. I'm obviously just a 3-year-old product manager. My daughter here is only 1-year-old, but yeah, I'm like a baby trying to teach you guys something or trying to share something. But yeah, I'm always learning, and so there's things that I can improve. The team here can tell you how I can improve. Just wanted to give you guys it's okay. That's part of product management. That's part of development. Is you're always learning and getting better. The last thing is just a thank you for having me. So I also teach a course, and so one of the skills for product managers is again data analysis, and SQL is a very helpful tool for that. Me and my friend we teach a course on SQL, so you guys can use this free coupon code to enroll into our course if you want to take it. So yeah, that's it. Any questions? Yeah. Question or question?
Actually, I feel really bad because I just bought this course. More than 30 days. It doesn't matter. So you are coming from non-CS background, but working as a product manager for 3 years. I'm also a dropout student from computer-related stuff.
Yeah.
So even though while creating a new feature, I'm even writing a brief for SQL queries. I'm trying to be very technical. But what about you? In this case, you are talking with technical guys to understand the efforts to create this XY chart. But how do you communicate with them without being highly technical?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think thinking about the product development process, I feel like one of the most important parts of the process for the product manager to focus on is the beginning portions of it, right? About finding the problem area and defining the problem. And so I think that part potentially, sometimes you don't necessarily need the technical experience per se. On the other hand, I think, yeah, the more technical teams you work with, probably the more you want to learn that stuff. And so, yeah, for me, it's just a matter of trying to talk with our engineers who are very gracious and will try to help me understand the way things are working, and talking with data scientists. So I'm also just, if you're going to work with a technical team, it's probably a good idea that you have some desire for that stuff. And so I think it's a matter of just trying to learn it yourself, taking some Udemy courses on.
I'm going to actually jump in on this one as well.
Yeah.
So David specifically works with our recommendations and search teams at Udemy. These are actually very technical areas because he needs to understand a lot of machine learning algorithms that are used. So despite not having a direct technical background in terms of his university training, one thing that makes David actually very effective is he just has a lot of innate curiosity and gets in there with the team, tries to understand things, even when the conversations do get technical. So whenever the team does reading groups to go through papers on how big companies are building their recommendations or search systems, David is participating in it. So having that genuine interest, even if you don't have that technical background, can often be enough to be very effective.
That's great.
Question,
Do you define a cannibalization risk score for each feature? For instance, you are working on search and discovery, but maybe one of your features may affect the payment, or you can show the best scores to users, but they didn't convert to paying users. How do you measure and also define before the feature implementation? Do you define a risk score for cannibalization?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. So the question is about cannibalization. Maybe make an improvement in one area, and maybe it does help in that area, but maybe there's some side effects to that. I think that definitely comes up in part of the risk assessment. So even with the refund thing, like one of the risks there is like when people like start refunding a lot and like take the course and just return it, you know. So we would like look at that. We would like make sure we analyze. Oh, what was the refund rate? Another thing that happens, what we've seen a lot in Udemy, is actually different pages compete with each other. So when you log in and you come to udemy.com, you're hit with a homepage, and we have all these recommendations for you. And then when we we've seen times when we optimize that page, the revenue from that page, like people are finding and enrolling from this page, but then they stop searching. Like they don't search, and so revenue from search drops. And so the way we kind of look at this is in experimentation, like Tom talked about, like the overall evaluation criteria, and so we'll look at it in the user's kind of entire session. So when we do experimentation, for example, let's say we launched experiment on that homepage. The moment someone hits that homepage, now they're entered into our experiment. Sometimes they're in the control, sometimes they're in the treatment, and then we don't look at just revenue from this page. We look at their entire revenue after they were in this experiment, because maybe they search, they do that, and then they go on and search. We're still looking at search revenue, so you want to see overall revenue go up, even if there is cannibalization. And sometimes cannibalization happens, but sometimes it's a matter of thinking through is the incremental, is the increase in one area overcoming the cannibalization in another area. So yeah, like thinking about a higher level metric that looks at the possible cannibalization effects. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and also you define all main metrics in Udemy, I guess. For instance, the revenue or discovery, or you have for instance, maybe 5 main metrics we have to look at after a feature launch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, well, so a lot of for our teams that we've been working on, the main metric has been revenue per visitor. We will sometimes look at, or we will often and we should try to look at some of those sub metrics to see did things play out the way we thought they would play out, right? So if we introduce an algorithm to search page, an improved algorithm on the search page, you might sometimes see revenue goes up, overall revenue goes up, but then search revenue goes down, and that might be kind of oh, that's kind of weird. Maybe we shouldn't launch that one, even though the overall revenue went up, because it's not doing what we thought it might do. And so, but yeah, there are other metrics that we can look at and that we try to look at. So
I believe there are many product managers in Udemy, and most of them are responsible for different features. And how do you tackle the problem of sustaining the consistent customer experience throughout the whole product? Because I believe many product managers try to develop features, and how can you manage this?
Not very well. That is definitely a problem, and I think part of that is an organizational structure problem. of like how do you get different teams to talk with each other and align at like higher level principles and strategies, while also letting teams be autonomous and be independent and just do what they think is best. And so, yeah, part of that is like I think an org structure problem. Tom could actually probably speak to this too. But I think we generally have like the PMs all meet together, and so that there's like a PM group, and then all the designers also meet together. So all the designers are kind of like talking with each other. They have design reviews. Data scientists, we also try to talk with each other, so that we're kind of like making sure we're not like conflicting with different things that other teams are doing. So I don't know, we kind of like, one way we try to solve for that is at the like organizational level, having certain meetings and processes in place. I think also like having a single metric, like overall evaluation criteria, helps with that as well. That way people aren't optimizing for a local thing that might hurt another thing there, but everybody's looking at kind of like the same overall metric as your final, like part of your final decision-making process. Does it help?
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Tom, to that?
Sorry.
Right, anything you want to add?
No, I think you got it.
Yeah, question?
How do you calculate the impact and effort scores?
Yeah, it's a bit of it's not always like scientific. A lot of it is like kind of your gut, but it's also kind of based on like your prior like data and prior history. So if we run other experiments similar to that, maybe you start to develop intuition of like, hey, like changing the color of that button is not gonna do much. After running so many experiments, you kind of start to understand like a little bit of like what is like a big impactful thing and what is not an impactful thing. So there's that, and then the effort is, I think the team like kind of is able to like think through like that's a very complex thing to do. Yeah.
And when you're going to team about like calculate the effort, do you have a really detailed story about the thing?
No. It's generally like I think there's like a general idea of what the solution might be, and the team can probably kind of give a rough swag of like what that's going to be like. And yeah, I think maybe one thing to know is like doesn't necessarily have to be like we're always just looking for like rough like estimations. It doesn't have to be a perfect estimation. Probably the engineering team can talk about this as well. Question?
My next question is about your organizational structure.
Yeah.
How do you form teams for features, for developing features? Are those teams already established teams and making features?
Yeah.
Or you form those teams based on new features or ideas? Regularly you change teams.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think honestly, and again, Tom can probably speak, but trying to deflect everything. But we're always changing. We're always like evolving. It's kind of a good thing, kind of a bad thing. I think that like we're always reorganizing our teams to try to figure out how we can be more effective. And so recently, like our company has like maybe like some high-level strategic initiatives, and we've created new teams around this. Of like, okay, we want people to focus on this because we think it's a high-level, high-impact area, and so we'll do that. There are some teams, like the search team, where like it's just a continuous investment. We know that thing's always going to exist. But even in the search team, we've kind of changed. We used to be like a full-stack team where it was like we would do front end, back end. We have a designer, data scientists, engineers. We recently switched to just focusing on the back end, and I think we're maybe even going to go back to a little bit of like bringing in the designer. Like Spotify actually has a lot of really interesting articles about this, like how to organize teams. One thing that they do, I think, is kind of like try to have one like functionality inside the team, so that the team is fully autonomous, that they can do everything just as a single team. So you get the benefit of specialization, but also the benefit of like end-to-end like ability. Yeah, and I think our teams are trying to move to that model. Oftentimes there's like resourcing issues. So for example, right now we're limited on designers, and so we have like a pool of designers that help with like many different teams. That's just like the way we deal. That's not ideal. We want a designer per team oftentimes, but sometimes you can't do that, and so we have like a shared resource or pool. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Which interpersonal skills do you use to handle conflicts in your team?
Wow, try to be funny, you know.
That's one.
I think like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not. It's weird. Also, like I think I felt like kind of insecure having this presentation because it's like I don't even know if I'm like doing a good job at some of these things. But I mean, I think empathy is obviously a very important one. Trying to understand the other person's perspective and not holding on too tightly to your opinion and not being like, oh no, I'm right, you're wrong. But like really trying to make sure you understand the other person and listening to them, and then like repeating that back to them. So I think empathy and understanding is probably one of the most important ones.
I know.
Yeah, question.
If you become the team leader of the product managers, what kind of KPIs you will prefer to work with, or what are your KPIs while you are reporting? Because your effort is not always impacts the results. By just checking the outcomes of your works by statistically might not be the best hint to assess your performance.
So are you saying?
What are your KPIs? Maybe it might be the shorter version.
Yeah, I think so. When I think about metrics, I think about like if we like the question I think about in my mind is if we provide a good experience, what do we expect to happen? What do we think will happen? Oftentimes that is like we expect. So for example, for search, we often expect if we have a good algorithm or if we have good features there, people will more easily find a good course and more likely to enroll. And if they're more likely to enroll, the revenue is likely to go up. And so there's so that's why we kind of focus on RPV is like one of our key metrics. But then you can break that down into components of like what makes up a good search experience. And one thing might be like relevance, like are the results in the you're seeing relevant? And so that we have other metrics that we kind of look at there, like offline metrics, like DCG and NDCG, to kind of like figure out like, oh, are we showing relevant results? And then the reason why some of these metrics are useful is sometimes you might be making an improvement that it's hard to see the effect on like maybe revenue. Like maybe you're improving relevance, but maybe like it will take it for whatever reason it might take a long time for it to reflect on the revenue, or like maybe it's just a better experience for the user, but it doesn't necessarily increase conversion. Like maybe people find things more quickly, for example, and so that can be things, but. That's a really good question. I think we're always trying to like look for new metrics. So like yeah, relevance. Like we measure things also like click-through rate and impressions and things like that. Impression per visitor, clicks per visitor. But yeah. Question? Yeah.
Well, as I think the product management is not an entry job, not an entry position, I guess. So how many years do you think that a developer should start considering being a product manager?
Can you rephrase the question? So like, how many years of engineering experience should they have before they do product manager, or
sector experience, maybe.
Some other experience?
Some work experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's a developer or not.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I mean, for me, like, I don't know, and also Udemy, our philosophy is oftentimes like we focus more on like the innate potential ability of a person more than the number of years of experience. So I think for me, that's kind of more of the question is like, when can you get to a state where we feel confident that this person has the ability to be a product manager, and that often is like working in related fields or related problems and having experience there. I think like oftentimes having some experience A/B testing, like coming up with like working with a group of people, like some type of collaborative role, like management role, those things are all very helpful. But like yeah, like for me, I had almost I had like A/B testing experience, but other than that, I didn't really have much experience before becoming a product manager. And that's actually one reason why like startups are actually a good environment for if you want to be a product manager. Startups are kind of a nice place to be because you're thinking about the business. You have a lot of like scope and you have a lot of impact that you can make. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. It's probably not a very satisfactory answer. Yeah.
I got the answer.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
This was our first event, and I hope you liked it. We are going to do this once in a month, and I would like to do it more frequently, but we'll see. At least what we want to do is make it sustainable, so that we have a series of events like until summer when people go for a holiday. So this is our first event, as I said. If you have seen something to be improved, please let us know, because we always say that feedback is fuel. So please let us know how we can improve this organization. And I would like to also thank, there are some friends, they just come up and then they said how we can help this organization, how we can help to share maybe the events or other things, carrying pizzas maybe. So thank you all for this, and I hope see you again.